He was barefoot, standing in the mud outside a $1 million rehab center. Just a boy, no older than 10, with dirt on his face and a strange calm in his eyes. When the old veteran wheeled his paralyzed granddaughter past, the boy didn't beg for food, didn't ask for money. He just said 10 words that made the grandfather stop cold. "Sir, I can make her walk again." And what happened next, no doctor, no machine, no prayer circle could have ever prepared them for. It had been exactly 312 days since Ellie had walked. Walter Pierce counted every single one of them, not because he wanted to, but because his mind was a vault, military-trained, unbending, and cruelly accurate when it came to keeping track of failures. And he counted losing her legs as his greatest failure of all. They told him the boating accident wasn't his fault, that a sudden storm, a snapped steering cable, and a freak rock beneath the surface weren't anyone's to predict. But he was the captain. He was the one who told them to push off, that the skies would clear, that nothing would happen. But something did. Something terrible. His daughter died instantly, and Ellie, his 6-year-old granddaughter, suffered a spinal injury that stole the very thing she loved most, motion. Now she sat quiet as a shadow, her once wild brown curls now limp against her pale cheeks, her green eyes watching the world through clinic van windows like they didn't belong to her. Walter watched her too, the way a man watches a house he's burned down and keeps hoping will rebuild itself. He'd spent his life commanding troops, chairing boardrooms, winning wars, and building fortunes. But none of it meant anything when Ellie stopped singing in the mornings. She hadn't drawn with color in months, just black crayons on white paper. He took her every Tuesday to a high-end rehab center in Savannah, where modern miracles were promised in cold rooms full of beeping lights and machines that sounded like factory lines. He nodded politely when the therapist said, "Long road, maybe one day, neurological fatigue." But inside, he was folding under a quiet grief that tasted like rusted metal. He wanted her to fight. But how do you ask a little girl who's lost her mother and her legs to fight when she's forgotten what hope feels like? He was desperate, but he didn't know it yet. Not until they pulled into the clinic gates that Tuesday morning and met a boy who looked like a ghost and spoke like an old man trapped in a child's skin. At first, Walter thought he was a statue. The boy was that still, cross-legged on the gravel near the clinic's rusted front fence, tapping one finger against the edge of a notebook that looked like it had been soaked in rain a dozen times and dried by the sun. He wore no shoes, just frayed wool socks turned brown at the soles and a camo jacket, several sizes too large, the name patch long faded but still stitched on the breast pocket, like it once meant something. He wasn't begging. He wasn't talking. He was watching, quiet and deliberate, like he wasn't a child at all, but some kind of relic left behind. He had a stick in his hand, and with it, he drew tiny human shapes in the dirt, stick figures walking, running, kneeling. Then he'd erase them with a soft swipe of his palm and start over. Walter had seen a lot in his life, war zones, refugee camps, boardroom breakdowns, but he had never seen a child so calm in chaos. Parents walked by without noticing him. Some whispered. A nurse in the clinic muttered, "Ghost kid," under her breath and shook her head. Ellie stared through the van window, tracking the boy's movements with unusual interest. Walter noticed, but didn't comment. The van stopped. The door opened. He went to lift Ellie from her seat when the boy looked up and locked eyes with him. It was strange, not challenging, not needy, just knowing, like he'd been waiting. Walter ignored the chill on his neck and hoisted Ellie into her chair, wheeling her toward the gate, focusing on the clinic's doors, not on the barefoot boy drawing life in the dust behind them. But he should have, because that boy was about to shatter everything Walter believed about control, healing, and who gets to change a life. Walter was halfway to the clinic steps when the boy's voice floated through the cold morning air like a song sung too close to the bone, soft, unshaken, and terrifying in its certainty. "She can still walk," the boy said, not loud but not timid either. "I can help." Walter stopped mid-push, one hand still on the wheelchair handle, the other curled instinctively into a fist. He turned slowly, narrowing his eyes. "Excuse me," he asked, voice low, the kind that used to make grown men straighten their backs. The boy stood now, notebook under one arm, stick gone, just the gravel and the gate between them. "She can still walk," he repeated, like it was a fact, not a wish. You don't need machines. You just need time. For a moment, neither of them moved. Ellie looked up at Walter, then at the boy. Walter stared hard, scanning him like he was an enemy line. Searching for the scam, the setup, the madness. "You're not a doctor, son," Walter said flatly. "No, sir," the boy replied. "But I remember what it feels like to lose everything. That counts for something." Walter took a step forward, his voice dropping. "If this is some kind of cruel joke, it's not," the boy interrupted. "Give me 30 minutes. If nothing happens, you never have to see me again." There was no anger in his voice, no desperation, just that same eerie calm. Walter shook his head. "And why in God's name should I trust some kid off the street with my granddaughter?" The boy looked directly at Ellie now. "Because she hasn't smiled in a long time, and I think she wants to." Ellie didn't answer, but her fingers tightened slightly on the wheelchair armrest. And for the first time in nearly a year, Walter felt a flicker of something he'd buried deep. Not belief, not yet, but doubt in all the things he thought he knew. And sometimes doubt is where miracles begin. That night, the bourbon glass sat untouched beside Walter's leather chair. The house was still, the kind of silence that wraps around grief like a noose. He stared at the flames in the fireplace, but saw only the boy's eyes, the way he didn't blink, the way he didn't stutter, the way he didn't flinch. Walter had built his life on logic, discipline, and results. He didn't pray because praying meant surrender, and he didn't surrender. He didn't believe in faith because faith was for men who hadn't stared down artillery fire and come out the other side with blood on their boots and smoke in their lungs. But now he was shaken because all the doctors, all the equipment, all the money hadn't made Ellie move. And that boy, barefoot, nameless, with dirt under his nails, spoke one sentence that haunted him like a hymn. "You just need time." Walter didn't know what scared him more, the idea that the boy might be wrong or that he might be right. Pride is a stubborn chain, especially for men who wore medals and buried daughters. It tells you to be careful, to play the odds, to guard your heart. But Walter was tired of guarding, tired of sterile clinic rooms, tired of watching Ellie shrink into herself. The boy had said 30 minutes. No promises, no tricks, just a chance. And sometimes, when everything else has failed, even the proudest men reach for something they don't understand, just to feel like they haven't failed completely. The next morning, Walter found himself back at the clinic parking lot without knowing how he'd truly gotten there. He didn't tell Ellie why they weren't going inside yet, just wheeled her over toward the gate where the boy had been. And there he was, seated cross-legged again, drawing. No fanfare, no smile, just waiting. Walter approached slowly, standing stiff and formal like he was addressing a commanding officer. "You get your 30 minutes, he said. "But this comes from her. If she doesn't want to, it ends right now." The boy looked at Ellie and gave a slight nod. "Hi," he said. Ellie didn't respond, just looked at him with that same quiet distance she gave the world now. "I used to help my sister draw with her toes," the boy said. "She laughed so hard the first time she painted a flower. I think you might like it too." Ellie blinked. "What happened to her?" she asked, her voice scratchy from disuse. The boy paused. "She died. In a fire. I couldn't save her. But I remember her laughing. That's what I'm trying to remember again." For a long moment, Ellie said nothing. Then she whispered, "Maybe." That was all. Just maybe. But in that one word was a door cracking open. Walter exhaled like he hadn't breathed in months. The boy stood. "There's a bench by the field," he said. "We start there." Walter wheeled Ellie over, his hand shaking slightly on the chair. He didn't believe in much anymore. But he was here, and the boy was here, and Ellie had said maybe. And sometimes, maybe is the loudest yes you'll ever get.